of Webster. So, Mark, the stage is yours.
All right, this, presentation is for the 2024 MS4 annual report. Part of our MS4 permit, we need to make a public statement on our report, for what, to basically cover part of the, permit coverages on it. A quick overview of what an MS4 is for everyone. It's the municipal municipal separate storm sewer system. Basically all our rainwater, stormwater that does not go to the sanitary sewer. This stuff all gets outletted, outfalls into the creeks and ends up in the bay or the lake. The purpose of all this is to reduce stormwater pollution and protect water quality. It starts through the US EPA, and it's also regulated through the DEC. It's one of these ones that are actually, has authority through both EPA and the DEC, being in New York State. In 2024, the new permit came out, which had a lot of new changes in it, and this is kind of where we're at right now with the town. As part of the MS4, we belong to the Stormwater Coalition of Monroe County. Basically, all the different towns and villages that are part of an MS4 kind of grouped together so we could handle some of the more major parts of it and not have to, everyone has to do the same thing. A lot of it has to do with their education. The education portion of the permit is very large. We wouldn't be able to handle it as a town by ourselves. If you go to like Red Wing games, or signs up there for the Stormwater Coalition for different stormwater problems that we have throughout the county. They run ads, we have billboards, they run a bunch of different study groups and education through the Monroe County Science Center. They go to local schools, so that covers our end of our education purpose of it. They also assist with the annual reporting, they assist in training. They have 5 or 6 people that work through either the county or the soil and water division of the county that come out to different towns and help do all the training for stormwater ponds, for how to protect spills and how to handle spill situations. One of the new parts of the permit this year, they wanted to make sure there's a division between what we'd call a public pond that the town maintains and make sure it's working properly, in a private pond. I would use like Wegmans, for example. When you pull into Wegmans, you see their big stormwater pond. The town does not take care of that. Wegmans takes care of that. So in order for us to understand what they're doing, we have been working for years on trying to keep data on who's keeping track of this. Maria has really stepped in on this, and we are close to having 50 private ponds now being taken care of, and we get reports every year from each company that does that for them. And in return, as part of the whole stormwater tax that we have, they get, if these companies do their reports every year, they get a break on their tax for the drainage fees that we have. And it's been working out very well. Every year, more and more, we get more and more. I'm guessing we're probably at about 85% of the private ponds we're getting data on. Another update with this new permit are revised reporting timelines. Now the annual report spans from January 3rd through January 2nd. And instead of being due on January 1st, everything's due now in April, so there's some time to kind of catch up on everything. Also, they put into this new permit an interim progress certificate, which is required every 6 months now. And we'll have they correlate it to the same time as the annual report. We submit our annual report and our 6-month progress report at the same time. Basically, what they're trying to do here with a 6-month progress report is they ask questions about, are you ready for next year's requirements? So there's no way for us to say, oh, we didn't know this was coming up in August. They ask you 6 months in advance, so everybody can get working on what the new requirements are gonna be. So part of that interim progress certificate is based on the new regulations the new permit that came out has regulations for the first year, we had to meet these goals. In 2 years, we have to meet these goals. In 3 years, we have to meet these goals. So this is, again, where this progress, interim progress really comes in. We know we have to get ready for next year, we're gonna have all these new reporting requirements. Another good thing about this new permit is they went away from paper reports where you used to have to submit 3 to 4 copies of the same report. Now everything is done through the New York State DEC website. There's a reporting on their website, it's all digital. You click yes, you click no. If you click yes, another box comes up with some questions about that. If you state no for something, it comes up with a reason. You have to explain your reasons why you haven't done something. Couple other annual report changes. The old report was very data-driven on the town. How many SWIPs did you perform? How many pond inspections did you perform? Now they want a more in-depth understanding of what does your SWIP report include? Did you do this? Did you do that? Are you following the permit requirements for each one? Instead of how many ponds, they want to make sure you're inspecting the pond the correct way. And it's just like I said, there's a lot of yes/no questions on it. And in this report, annual report, they were asking quite a lot of questions we had to say no to because that we're not in compliance. But they're asking, are you in compliance for stuff that they're requiring in 4 years? So we were stated, no, we're not we are not doing this yet. The reason is it's not required for 4 years. So it was probably about 80% of the answers were no, but they were all because they're just not, we don't need to have that done yet. And this is, as part of the coalition, everybody was answering the questions the same way. No towns are ready to catch up on stuff that's not due for 5 years. Similar requirements is why we're here. We have to make a public statement of where our report is and what we're doing on it. A couple other new requirements that are big for the town is our GIS system. They're really pushing for a lot of, this data needs to be in our GIS system now. So 2 of the big ones are outfalls and interconnections. We have all these mapped, but they want information on each one of them. For instance, our outfalls, we have somewhere around 360 outfalls in Webster. Now they want to know what pipe it is, what type of pipe, how often is it, how much water comes out of it. They have 5 or 6 other things they want to know for each one. And all these some of them were due this year, like making sure we just have them all mapped. Do you know where all our outfalls are? We have that. Next year, it's like, do we know all the diameters of the pipes? Are the pipes clean? How well are these outfalls working? And then in 5 years, there's another step that we're going to have to take. That's really the biggest part of this whole new permit and reporting is like, it's a step-based type of report. We did a report for this year. Next year, the report's going to include the second year requirement. So that's about it for the stormwater.
Thanks, Mark. And, well, I'll open it up to the board members to any questions or comments.
I was gonna ask how frequently the requirements change, but it sounds like there's this tiered approach, so you can see the requirement changes over the next 5 years in advance.
Correct.
Is it prudent to start any of those new requirements sooner? Because it sounds like a huge undertaking, and is the town doing that?
Yeah, I would say we are working on pretty much all of them at some level, knowing which ones are huge that, hey, this will take 5 years, like we have to work on it for 5 years. The ones that are due in October for our 2-year report, yeah, we're really polishing them up now to make sure we're ready.
And is this just for commercial this is just the commercial,
These would be for,
or these are for the town maintained ones?
Basically for the town.
The companies do their own?
it is intertwined in the permit that most of it is focused on what the town's doing on it.
Yeah.
The private ones would be how we handle if they aren't doing it. So there are, in the regulations, it states if Wegmans, for say, stops paying attention to their stormwaters,
Yeah,
there's ways we have to handle that.
okay,
But the first and foremost is they present a report every year, and that suffices just about everything as long as they're meeting the requirements of that report.
and then the work we're doing with the GIS consultant, is this part of the work they're doing is helping to work the mapping and the details of the map, or just identifying where they are and the town employees have to do all of the details at each location?
It is, yeah, I would say right now, our GIS system isn't really ready to handle that much information. We don't have it set up right, and that's really the main work of our GIS consultant right now, getting the behind-the-scenes GIS ready for all this information. Today, I was actually working with them on, here's a map of a new subdivision that we want to work. How are we gonna get that to get into our system? All the different layers that go into it, the manhole covers to the grates on the side of the street, where do those pipes lead to, which outfall do those lead to? How do we get all that information to populate into our GIS system? It's, so far, that GIS consultant's been very well to us. We're on
Okay,
a very
good.
good terms, we're meeting every Thursday, we are in contact pretty much every day via email for, hey, we see this, how do you want that? I see this, can you guys do it this way? And it's really been working out well, so.
Excellent.
But they were,
Flora,
the big reason for them coming on is
to
this
do
MS4 new
Okay.
requirements that we just can't get away from, so.
Jenny?
Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
She got all the questions. Very good.
I'm gonna catch us up on time, we'll have some time, but I do wanna mention two things on this. And I'm not trying to be a buzzkill, but the first one is called unfunded mandate. That's what this is.
Yep.
And it started however many years ago with the New York State DEC. And as they increase the amount of reporting and the things that need to be done by a town, especially a town like Webster that is, I guess I'll say, is a kind of a wet town, as far as drainage issues and things of that nature, relative to probably the average town in New York State. So, no reason to cry in our milk. It's a reality. It's an unfunded mandate. So we're trying to spend our time and energy and resources on how we manage it and get ahead of it. Second thing is that a couple months ago we switched Pat Stevens, the superintendent of the highway department. He was the, I'll call it interim MS4. What do you call it, Keith and Mark? Official officer. All right. It had previously been with Mary Harrington in engineering, and so once Keith was on board, I think, Keith, you are now the official officer. So I'm going to put this in layman terms. The way I look at this from a town of Webster government structure, the engineering department, which right now is pretty much Keith and Mark, who just gave the presentation, I would say that they're the administrative side of MS4 compliance and reporting and all that. And the highway department, as many of you know, handles drainage. We have a drainage foreman. That department handles drainage in town. So I would say that they're the execution, and they are also the money that comes from the town, because these things cost money to do, and we didn't get it from the state. Now, the good news is that these increased requirements and things of that nature, the funding from our drainage, I'll say, fund balance, has increased in the last couple of years, because this town board, and here comes Paul Adams, our finance director, and he can corroborate this, we have made the what I consider the appropriate moves over the last 2 to 3 years to, first, we got the remaining 4,000 residential parcels in this town into the drainage district, so they're funding and helping put money into this fund for drainage jobs. Previous to that, there were 11,000 parcels in that drainage district, paying approximately $40 a year on their tax bill, but 4,000 houses that were built, I think, circa prior to 1970, they were exempt from this. The problem is that those 4,000 houses and those residents are enjoying the same benefits of the drainage work that is being done. The town board realized that, and I think it was circa 2023, we fixed that. And so I think starting in the town and county tax bill of 2024, all 15,000 residential parcels got charged that approximate $40. And we actually were able to drop it, Paul, I think, by about $2 per house.
Dropped
By
a few dollars.
Gotcha. And here comes Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent. We promptly then followed up by saying we don't have commercial properties in a drainage district. And those commercial properties, a lot of times because of how big the buildings are and or how big their driveways are or how they've constructed things on site, it's, I think the word is impermeable, what is it called?
Permeable surfaces.
Yep.
I'm gonna give you, because I'm not the brightest guy in the world, here's the difference between if you have a 10-acre farm field, when it rains and it water, it just seeps into the ground, depending upon what the soil is. You take that 10 acres and you go build a commercial place that has an 80,000 square foot building and a bunch of sidewalks or parking lots, that part of that parcel no longer can take that water in. You lost some acreage on that parcel that back in its natural state was taking the water in. Where does the water go? And that's where the town infrastructure has to build certain whatevers, whether they're retention ponds or easements for drainage, so there's swales and things like that. We needed to get the commercial properties into that drainage district. We made the move, I think it was in late '24, Paul? And
Yes.
was it in the January 25 tax bill, or will it be in the January 20?
The 25 tax bill was the first year of all the commercial properties.
Right. So we've straightened it out where everybody is, I'll call it, paying their fair share, which, you know, is a subjective term, but they're paying into it. So the fund balance for drainage jobs has increased the last couple of years. Now what we need to do is marry up the engineering department as the administrative of these new things with the highway department, which is the execution of it. And hopefully in the next year to 2 years, we can start doing some of the back projects on drainage ponds in this end. But some of the projects I know that Pat is really itching to get done that are proactive projects. So that's my 2 cents on this. And I still saved 1 minute from the next place. Not bad. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you very much, Mark
Thank you.
and
But
Pat.
that's very good planning. That was before my time, much of it, but that's very good planning on the town site to have the foresight to know that this is gonna cost more money and it's unfunded, to find a way to look at it more holistically for the town, so it's not a burden on the 11,000 houses. And it spreads across the town, and now you have the money to do the jobs that need to be done.
Well, and Jennifer, I don't want to, now I'm cutting into your time and I want to do that.
Not quite yet.
Shout out to Joe Herbst. I'm going to give Joe Herbst a lot of credit on this, who was the highway superintendent for many years and retired in February of 21, and Pat came on 4 years ago in April of 21. Joe Herbst, during the 14 months I worked with him as supervisor, he's like, we got a ton of drainage jobs to do. We don't have the money. We don't have the resources. This is going to be a problem. He was definitely in my ear about that. So I got to give him a lot of credit for starting that swale, or whatever you want to call it, that moved us toward the 23 and 24 actions. So I think we've done a good job getting the funding, and now we're going to move toward the execution. And I want to, well, it's only 6:50. I guess, well, that was quick.
We're still on time.
So our next
you.
agenda item tonight is a presentation by a crew from Verizon. I'm not sure exactly who from Verizon will be on the podium and microphone presenting this. But, and I will not have this cut into your time, but I just want to say this, and I hopefully can get this done in a minute. John, I'd lose that bet, right? Tonight's presentation, and subsequently at our town board meeting tonight, which has a public hearing regarding a proposed cell tower on Creekside here in town, is really the culmination of about a 2.5-year effort that I think it was back in 21, 22 that Verizon, through, maybe not Verizon directly, but one of their subcontractor property owners, this and that, got a lease or a proposed lease down on the corner of Pellet and Lake Road to put a cell tower in. Pellet and Lake Road historically had been a horrible place for cell coverage. And during that time, people were telling me, you do know that when I'm down there, sometimes I go into Rome and I'm getting Toronto. And I said, come on, that's an exaggeration to make a point. Well, I went down there to talk to some residents. My phone went into Rome at that time. There was a lot of pushback from the residents about that. I thought it was a lot of pushback. I've talked to the Verizon people who do this every day, and they said, oh, this was nothing compared to chairs being thrown downstate at meetings and whatever. But for my liking, I didn't like the drama. I didn't like the dragged out public hearings. I didn't like any of that. When it got all resolved and the tower was built, and I think that most people are like, it was much to do about nothing because the tower is 250 yards off the road and is really not an eyesore, in my opinion. But when that got done, I reached out to Mike Crosby, right, who was with Verizon. I reached out to Bob Bergdorfer, who was the attorney for Verizon. I said, hey, listen, I don't want to go through that again. Why don't you get together with the town, with Josh Artuso, our Director of Community Development, and myself, and why don't you tell us where we have cell phone coverage issues in town, and let's work together proactively to identify sites that would probably have the least pushback because of not being around, 150 neighbors or whatever. And that started somewhere in late 22, and I gotta say, the first one that was done, and it's not a major tower, but it's what you put on the top of Cherry Ridge, whatever that thing is, Mike, that covered one of the areas, right? Yes. That went through this board, this and that, crickets. Nobody complained. In fact, the Cherry Ridge residents were all cheering for it, right? The next area is Creekside, an area of town that has a shortage, or what do you guys call it? It's either, a gap in coverage. A gap in coverage. But this was something that we have been working with Verizon on because the site that they're talking about is, for the most part, town-owned. So it's where there is, relative to most things, a limited amount of houses around, and based on tree coverage and this and that, probably a very limited amount of people that will see this thing relative to other places. So that's my preamble. I would have lost that it was 1 minute. But now I'll hand the baton off to the counselor.
Thank you, Supervisor. My name is Laura Smith. I'm with Nixon Peabody. I'm joined today by Kathy Pomponio and Mike Crosby of Verizon, Nico Facey of NBC, and Dave Weisenreiter, I've been practicing your last name, I don't think I got it, of Costich Engineering. And together we make up the Verizon team. As the supervisor correctly pointed out, we always look for gaps in coverage and where coverage needs to be filled. Verizon is a public utility. It's licensed and regulated by the FCC. And when looking at and going through the analysis that the supervisor pointed out, looking for gaps in coverage within Webster, it was identified that this Creekside site has inadequate coverage. I also brought, I know it's posted on the screen, I brought some printouts if the town board is interested in printouts. Otherwise, I will just refer to the materials that are being posted on the screen.
The screen's fine. I think we have the printouts as well.
Oh, great. So as noted on, first we'll go to page 5 of the PDF. Thank you, perfect. As the supervisor noted, in going back to what is the cellular technology. The cellular technology, it's really a honeycomb of a network, and it looks at towers and cells and how towers can be placed to fill those cells. An analogy that is by Bob Berdorf, my colleague and mentor, is that cells are like a flashlight. And when you shine a flashlight on a desk, as the farther up you get, the brighter it is, or I'm sorry, the wider the scope, but the less bright of the light. The closer it is the more intense of the light, but it doesn't shine as far. When you move the light this way, the light goes that way, and vice versa. If you get too close to another cell, you can have that interference or overlap. And if you get too far away from a place that you're trying to serve, you're not adequately serving that coverage. So again, as the supervisor correctly pointed out, you'll see here, there's this inadequate coverage located right where the Webster North cell tower will be located. The green areas are showing good coverage, yellow is less intense coverage, and then orange is where you lose coverage as if you're driving on a rural highway. White is showing a lack of coverage on that low band frequency. So to remedy the coverage, we go through a site selection analysis. Typically, that process includes Nico and his team going out and doing a site selection tour of parcels located within a search ring that meet the setback requirements and the land use requirements, and landlords are willing to enter into a lease negotiation with Verizon. Here, we are very fortunate. Our first choice is typically to go on municipal property, and that was available here in Webster. So the actual action before the town board is to lease property for Verizon, but we did want to go through this coverage analysis to show you, as the supervisor was noting, this is where we need coverage, this is where we need a facility, and this is ideally located where the town facility the town property is available. I'll also note, if we could go to page 6 of the PDF, that will show, that's a projection of what the coverage will look like once the Webster North cell phone tower is online. So it's going from a lot of white, a lot of lack of coverage, to green full coverage. And again, there's still some areas for Verizon to work on for those coverage gaps, but this really fills a need right in the heart of Webster. If I could ask you now to go to page 1 of the PDF. That's just a quick look at the towers that are already online in that search ring where the parcel, it would be ideally located to serve the area that we're looking to serve. And last, I'll ask you to go to page 15. Yep, that's it. Which gives a nice demonstration of what the proposed site will look like should the town go forward with leasing land to Verizon. And quickly, I'll note, the proposed lease will be for 10,000 square feet. The location is at 1209 Creekside Trail, together with access and utilities from the right-of-way. The lease would be a 5-year lease with up to 4 5-year renewals, and the annual rent would be a continuing payment to the town. With that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions.
How much are you anticipating, for paying the town for the leasing?
The rent amount is
Yes.
$20,000, $20,400 in the first year, and then it'll increase by 2% each year.
And if I can jump on that, I want to thank Keith. You were you were the project manager for the town on negotiating that lease. So, thank you. Any other questions for Laura? It's a pause, right? You said you'd pause for questions.
Pause for
Is
questions.
there more?
The only other note I will make, that I had on my checklist I didn't yet share is that the proposed antenna would be 135 feet with a 4-foot, lightning rod on top.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm not, is anybody else from your team going to get up and say anything, or you are? Okay.
We'll let
All
Dave.
right.
Hi, Dave Weisner with Costich Engineering. The site does have a few challenges that I thought the board should be aware of as well. We did walk the site with our Patron and kind of with the cell site location. As you are familiar, or might be familiar, take the existing driveway back. There is like a clear area with a little gravel turnaround, and if you continue beyond that, you get to the pump station. Art did want the open area maintained such that larger construction vehicles can get turned around in that area. So we did take the cell site and push it a little bit further west than where we had originally proposed it, so it is like halfway into the wooded area. On this site, there's also a 100-year floodplain. In this instance, we are approximately 2 feet above the 100-year floodplain with all our compound area, so that's not so bad. We did have a wetlands delineation completed last September. The old DEC wetlands mapping did not have any state wetlands in that area. On the federal wetlands, there are federal wetlands associated with both Mill Creek on the east side of the property and the tributary to Mill Creek on the west side of the property. The wetlands delineation was completed, so there are 3 wetlands that were identified as part of the wetlands delineation. The furthest one is to the far southeast corner of the property. This is all shown on, not this plan, but one of the plans in the set. The second wetland is about 65 feet south of the compound, and the third wetland is to the west by about 95 feet. With the new New York State DEC guidelines, a portion of the compound area is within the New York State DEC 100-foot buffer, so there will be wetlands permitting associated with this particular project, so that will require us some time to get that permitted. I can answer any site plan related questions that you might have.
What's the status of the jurisdictional determination with the DEC?
We did get that back. It was a positive jurisdiction. I can see if I got the letter on there.
Kyle.
It just came in here in the last 2 weeks.
I don't, it's not so much a question, but I know, Pat, you've been out on this site many times, and so has Art, from a town assessment of if this is the appropriate where and all that. Art's not here tonight. I know he's been out there a lot. This has been going on for about 18 months, has it not? Which I will say is kind of, measure twice, cut once. I think the homework was all done on both sides, and that leads us to tonight, and then the public hearing tonight, so.
I do have coworkers that live in the area. They are screaming for this tower because they do not have good cell coverage, so that's a fact.
Well, the map was pretty astonishing how
Yeah.
much range and gap will be filled with this, and sadly, there's none needed.
Dave, for full disclosure, I live in the area.
There you go.
Do not put it
How's
up.
your cell coverage?
What's it? No, it's, it's a tough area.
Can I just say something?
Sure, if you wouldn't mind, because when we're on tape and whatever, they'll never hear you, Kathy, and they'll never see it.
Hi, I'm Kathy Pomponio. I am a project manager with Verizon Wireless, and I just wanted to say on the wetland topic that, yes, we did get the positive jurisdictional determination just a few days ago, but we did expect that. We were prepared for that, and I do want to say that we just did a site in Penfield called Penfield Highway, where we applied for a buffer permit with the DEC, and it was granted. So, we had to go through a process with the DEC, answer some questions, which we did, and they granted us the buffer permit. So we expect the same process to take place in this situation as well.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay,
Thank you.
And I don't, well, I'll aim this at Kyle, but Laura, you might have some insights on this since you guys do this from a legal standpoint. Big difference between this and the one I referenced before, Pellet and Lake, is that was a private owner that you had negotiated a lease with. I don't know if that was the reason why it had to go through planning board and all of that through public hearings and also the town board. But the way I'm understanding it is this process will, because it's our land, town will not have to go in front of the planning board. Is that correct?
You want me to answer, or would you like to take this question?
I'll let you have
Okay,
the first
so-
stab.
The ownership of the land doesn't change the process per se, right? Our code requires it to go through the planning board. However, there is case law that would enable the town, if they decided as such, that they could declare themselves exempt from the zoning requirements for this particular land. There's certain criteria that has to be met under the case law, but that is an option that's available. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to that, Laura.
Yeah, I will add that, you know, in the first instance, Verizon always looks for co-location on a tower, right? So I want to set that as our first standard is always to co-locate on a tower for a multitude of reasons. One being, it's easier, right? It's easier for the town, it's easier for the applicant. The next location that Verizon looks for is municipal property. It's a way for entering into a partnership with the municipality, ensuring that the municipality is receiving rent from the lease. So we do try to target municipally owned property, and then we'll look to higher densities, commercial use, industrial use, such as that. I will note that because it is property owned by Webster, there is a court case, it's from the 1980s, it's actually the city of Rochester against Monroe County regarding a zoning dispute at the airport. And through that, the Court of Appeals has set forth a balancing test for when both either a municipality is developing land that it owns within another land use jurisdiction, or when a town is also developing land that it owns within its own municipality. And the balancing test is the same, which I find interesting as a municipal attorney, that you have to go through the same analysis if it's, you know, Penfield owns a parcel within Webster, you would go through that same analysis if it was Penfield or Webster town-owned property. So one of the items that will be before the town board for your consideration is a determination of whether this parcel and this use meets that balancing test that was set forth in County of Monroe versus City of Rochester. I think it's City of Rochester versus County of Monroe. So that will be one of the actions before the town board for the town board's consideration of, does this project and its use, which will be, you know, providing cell phone coverage for the public use, it will be expanding emergency life and safety ability for individuals to use cell phones. That's the type of analysis the town board will have to go through when doing a Monroe balancing test, same as going through seeker, and then also determining whether or not to lease the land to Verizon.
Yeah, excellent summary by both of you, and I, you know, what is it in court? You're not supposed to ask a question you don't have the answer to, and I probably shouldn't have put you both on the spot like that, but you did great. It's interesting because, you know, in about 20 minutes, when we start a public hearing on this, and that's really the first formal town board action on this, is to have the public hearing. And everything you just said, Laura, you know, I guess is factual. The reality is, if 150 people come in here and take that podium and scream bloody murder against it, it will probably slow up the process, and we have to look at this a little bit closer. On the other end of the spectrum, if nobody comes in, I know this, we're not doing any resolutions tonight. Because really, I would have to, as supervisor, step back from that public hearing, and if nobody came here to say anything against it, now I gotta turn around to Kyle, and hopefully also collaborating with you and say, well, what now is the proper sequence of resolution or resolutions, seeker, that balancing, the this and that? Can we say, we can keep this encompassed within the town board decision, and we don't have to go off to the planning board or zoning board if there's a height variance at 135 feet and all that. I'm not ready to have that conversation today. I figured we'll compartmentalize this. We figured we'd give you the presentation, so, you know, and obviously at the public hearing, you get a chance to say something too. If nobody shows up, I don't know if you have to say anything else at the public hearing. You just had 20 minutes to, you know, present and give that, and also have questions if the board still has questions on this.
I just had a question about the height. Is there gonna be a height variance required, Josh?
Yes, if, depending on which direction the board takes. But under the traditional rules, it is a little bit higher than what's permitted.
It's 120, is that the
And-
height that's permitted?
I believe it's either 100 or 120, I can't recall.
Can I ask you, Josh, the traditional rules, but are you saying that the precedent of court cases show that the town board can step into the role of granting that height variance?
You wouldn't be granting a variance, you'd be declaring that the town of Webster is exempt from those zoning requirements.
Okay. We're not voting on anything tonight, there's no resolutions, it's good conversation, this is great, all right? I mean, let's go to the next step, which is the public hearing, and then after that, like, I won't be redundant, we would circle back and say, well, how do we proceed on with this? You know, anything else at this time? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Laura, Dave, Kathy. Nico, good to see you. I figured you were gonna get up there and dazzle. Mike, if we started throwing chairs, would you have presented? They bring you out of the bullpen when there's physical, you know, okay. Well, good, I'm glad they didn't have to bring you out of the bullpen. All right, do you feel like I shorted your time? Because I gave a monologue beforehand. Thank you. Because you know I'll have Catholic guilt if I did do that. You know, we've talked about it. Well, our next item up tonight, and I did short your time, Josh, and potentially Paul. Our last item tonight is a presentation of the bid results for the demolition of 600 Ridge Road, the former Webster Furniture Stripper Building. So, Josh, the podium is yours.
Thank you. So the board may recall I was here last month, May 1st, to give a presentation on issuing a request for proposals for demolition services. And here I'm here tonight to provide an update based on our results. So, and I'll also be providing the board with an update on our Restore New York grant application. So, on May 2nd, the town did release a request for proposals for demolition services for 600 Ridge Road. We posted an ad in the Webster Herald to comply with our local legal requirements, and we also advertised it in the New York State Contract Reporter. We emailed directly to several local demolition contractors just to kind of make the opportunity known to as many contractors as possible. A pre-submittal walkthrough was held on May 13th. I believe only one prospective bidder did attend that walkthrough. And then there was a period for prospective bidders to submit any questions or requests for clarification on the scope of what was being asked for. The deadline for that was May 16th, and we did receive several questions. So the answers to those questions were provided back to the prospective bidders on May 22nd, and the proposals were due last Friday, May 30th. So we did receive approximately eight bids. However, one of the contractors did withdraw their bid. So they were quite wide-ranging, anywhere from just under $50,000, all the way up to $175,000. That's just for the demolition portion. We did have within the request for proposals an alternate for backfill and grading, so that we asked that a separate number be provided, and it would be up to the town whether or not we wanted to move forward with that component of the project. So as you could see, Elite Excavating and Demolition is the lowest bidder. Basically, their bid for demolition of the building and all of the associated work that goes along with that would be just under $50,000, and a cost of $10,000 for the backfill and grading work once the structure is removed. There's also an air and project monitoring requirement for a project of this nature due to the asbestos and lead paint that's on the building. So we did get three bids, and they kind of range based on whether or not it will be a 1-week project or a 2-week project. So Logier, Paradigm, and Lou Engineers all submitted bids. Their daily rates were relatively close to one another, as were their price per air samples, and then there is a final report that is required. The cost of that did range from $150 to $850, and one of them was included in the price. We're anticipating, on the conservative side of things, that it would be closer to a 2-week project. So our recommendation for this component would be to go with the low bidder of Logier. So interestingly enough, I was here last month, as I mentioned, and we had still not heard back from our application that we submitted back in December of 2024. This is our third attempt at trying to obtain this Restore New York grant funding for either rehab or demolition of this particular structure. At the time we submitted the application, we were estimating somewhere around $250,000 at that time. There were a couple other contingencies added to that are not included in this proposal for demolition services. But the point I'm trying to make is that unfortunately, we did learn on May 22nd that our application was not selected for funding during this round. So, given this information, there are some timing considerations. Town staff recommendation at this time would be to award Elite Excavating and Demolition for the demolition at their bid of $49,500. In terms of the backfill and grading component of the project, we did have some conversations with our highway department to see if that work could be performed in-house to try and save a little bit of money. But in speaking with the highway superintendent, that is a very busy time of year for them. They have a lot of projects that they're working on for the county that actually brings in income. So when they crunched, did an evaluation of a cost-benefit analysis, the private bidding company actually apparently can do it cheaper than what it would be for us to perform it in-house. And plus, it would not pull town forces away from other jobs that are actually bringing in income. And then we would recommend going with Logier Environmental Consulting to perform the air and project monitoring as the demolition occurs. So the total cost anticipated from this effort would be approximately $65,350. which is significantly less than we had originally anticipated. So there are some timing considerations. We would be looking to finalize and execute a contract with them by June 13th. There are some advance notices that are required for a project of this nature. We do have to notify the Environmental Protection Agency and provide advance notice to DEC as well. The demolition work, if it's decided to move forward on, would commence on or around July 7th. We've confirmed the availability of the company to perform the work in that early July timeframe. However, they cannot guarantee availability past early July, as school abatement work usually picks up over the summer break, and it could be several months before they have the availability to come back and perform the work. So in terms of next steps, I think the next step is to make the decision on whether to proceed with demolition at this time. If the town board did decide to go in that direction, we would promptly execute the contract. We would begin preparing the required notices to the regulatory agencies. We'd work on obtaining a demolition permit, and then we would schedule and execute the demolition. So that is my update on the status of our efforts to quantify how much demolition would cost for this long-standing property that has continued to deteriorate over time. I did take the picture that's on the screen. That's a photo as of yesterday. I've noticed that on the western side of the roof, there's a couple new holes that have formed recently. So now the building is taking on water, and we really don't want to have to expend funds to tarp it or re-roof the structure at this point. So it's of our opinion that now would be an opportune time to move forward, but obviously that is up to the board.
Well, I would tend to agree with you that it's long since time to do something about this building. Just got a couple questions for you.
Sure.
As far as the backfilling goes, are they gonna remove all the foundation block before they backfill, or are they gonna use that as part of the backfill? I'm just looking down the road, if someone decides to come in there and build something, it's gonna make it more difficult for them if they leave the block right in there.
I believe we structured it so that that would be removed.
Okay. As far as the funding goes, did they tell you why we didn't receive the funding?
No, unfortunately, we learned of us not getting the award by seeing a press conference of those that did get awards. So we're still awaiting our official letter, and I anticipate they'll give us an opportunity to have a debrief to learn on how we could potentially improve our application next time around. But as I mentioned, this is the third attempt at this grant. I mean, we can try again, but I think the writing's on the wall.
By then. The building will be demolished by that point, I would imagine. What, where's the money coming from, though? I don't think we budgeted for that, did we?
Good question. That is why we have Paul here.
That's why we got Paul.
You are correct. We do not currently have any funds budgeted for this, but I'd like to turn it over to Paul to maybe explain what options, if any, we could potentially utilize.
Yeah, I mean, we would have to do probably a budget amendment, could take it from general fund balance. Probably be the only option at this point. We did budget some contingency funds, there's a little bit left there, so another option. At least the price is somewhat reasonable, less than what I thought it would be.
Yeah, the cost
I
came in
can't
lower
believe the
than we all.
swing in these bids is just
It's crazy, isn't it?
amazing.
Well, and Mark could comment that, you know, the lowest bid that decided to bail out, when Mark called them to get the three lowest bids to say, let's just make sure that you bid on what you thought you were bidding on. And during that conversation, the low bid said, oh, I guess we'd misunderstood that, and they said, we're out. And one of the main things is that every iota that is taken off-site has to be considered contaminated
Right.
material. And that is double the price going to the landfills, at least, I think, of just regular debris.
They have to do a wet demo, don't they?
Correct, so using nearby fire hydrants, yes, we've captured all of
Okay.
those specifics.
Any other questions, Ginny?
Have we ever think about, like you said, that in-house, it's gonna cost more for us to do it in-house than to have contractors come in and, to do this work?
Can I answer that one? Okay, because in-house, Pat, you took down the garage and you took down the addition. Those items didn't have contamination. They're not going to demolish a contaminated place. That's off the table.
You have to be certified for that.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
in-house
But
was looked
it
at.
was the backfill piece that was looked to be
Yes.
in-house, and that may be what Ginny was referring to. And is it less expensive to have a contractor do that because of the opportunity cost of revenue lost for county work? Sorry about that, Pat. Thank you for coming up.
So as Pat makes his way up, we will probably, when we end this workshop, we'll take a 5-minute break, and the town board meeting will probably start at 7:35 tonight, just to give everybody who's in attendance a little heads up.
Yeah, so it's a combination of a few things. As Josh said, it's pretty busy this time of year. I did run our analysis, and I think the biggest difference is that when you're already demoing a building, you have all your equipment and all your dumpsters and everything already on site, versus I'm coming in with trucks and hauling it every day. So I counted for a couple of days with about 6 guys, an excavator, a roller, things of that nature. Our fringe rate is fairly high when you get into the healthcare and everything that we pay. So I think a combination of possibly already being there, maybe this contractor has a source for some fill in a nearby area. There's a few factors that actually, when I saw this number, I said, it's gonna be hard for me to justify potentially pulling crews off of a county project where we're making revenue for the town in July, because July is our busiest month for that type of work, and come do this for that amount.
That makes perfect sense.
I think net, it would
Right.
probably yield a greater cost to the taxpayer. I think there's some efficiencies in them already being there, doing the work.
Yeah.
The one thing I have, and I'll try and do
No.
this really,
Go ahead. No, we
Wait.
don't, let's,
it's very disappointing about the grant. This would have been a no-brainer decision with the grant. And I, maybe a little more on the compelling event for the why now. So, you've mentioned the hole in the roof and some abatement and other issues that can happen with this building if we waited another year for this grant. Are there any other grants that can possibly be used for this? And what would the cost of the potential abatement be versus the cost of demolition? And I know that is, you kind of need a crystal ball for that, but has any thought been given to abatement and try again for maybe even a different, I don't know if there is a different grant, but.
can I just, that question is not as easy answered as possible, because we just had to secure the building for the winter and do those things to make it safe, so you'd have to throw those costs in there. We have an EPA grant that we got approved on to do the continuing Phase 2 environmental testing. As soon as this is a empty lot, we can bring them on there, and it's gonna be a lot easier to do their boring holes and get down to triangulate the water when there isn't a property there and there isn't the foundation block and all of that. So it's not an easy answer.
I was afraid it wasn't
Yeah.
gonna be an easy
Yeah.
answer. I just wish it was an easier decision by having the grant money.
Yeah, I will tell you
I
this,
agree.
we will, and this is very common with grants, we don't get a notice that says, hey, you didn't win. We find out in public relations, press releases, somebody else did. Then in 2 months, the state will come back most likely and let everybody who didn't win, they'll give them some canned letter that says, hey, sorry, you didn't get it. Then we schedule a debrief with that state agency, we do this all the time, and we ask them, well, what could we do? What is it about that grant application that made us get turned down? Now, we've done that debrief on this 2 previous times. I don't know the notes off the top of my head. When we go to do that debrief again, probably in 3 months, we'll see what they have to say. That will probably drive the decision on whether we apply for this grant again. So,
That makes sense.
yeah. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much, Josh and Paul and Keith and Pat and Mark and everybody from the Verizon team. And that concludes our workshop for tonight. We will go off